Hey there, welcome back to my kitchen. Today I'm sharing some really wonderful recipes. Several of these are some of our favorites and we have on our rotation. I hope you enjoyed today's video and find a recipe that's for you. Let's go ahead and get on into it. First off, we're making these dill chicken burgers. This is one of my husband's favorites. I'm starting by taking 2 green onions. I like to slice them down the thicker part just so that they're smaller pieces, and I'm going to chop this all the way down through the green part. Over to a large bowl, I'm adding 1 pound of ground chicken. Next, you'll need to add 1 cup of shredded cheese. I'm using pepper jack. You'll add your green onions in there, a 1/4 cup of mayonnaise, not Miracle Whip, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, a 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, and a 1/2 teaspoon of dill. Go ahead and get that combined really well. You want to make sure you get those seasonings spread all throughout your mixture. Over to a skillet that I heated up some oil in. I'm now adding my burgers in there. This mixture makes 4 decent sized burgers. I'm just going to cook those for a few minutes on each side, making sure they get this really nice color to them, and then just making sure they hit 165 degrees. Once my burgers were cooked all the way through, I did remove those to a paper towel lined plate just so any extra oil would come off of those. And before starting my second round of burgers, I wanted to make sure I didn't have any of this stuff burning. So I did just take a paper towel and remove some of that oil. And then I added some fresh oil in there. While my second batch was going, I went ahead and started getting things prepared for the burgers. And then for myself, I just decided to eat these without a bun with some sliced avocado on top, and wow, was it delicious. I dipped mine in some spicy ranch, and I just made some potato wedges on the side. This recipe is another one of our favorites. This Parmesan crusted chicken is so delicious. You will need to preheat your oven to 400 degrees. Next, you'll need 2 large chicken breasts, and I'm just going to slice those both down the center to create 4 smaller pieces. To season my chicken, I'm just sprinkling them with some salt, pepper, and garlic powder. I'm going to flip them all over and just season the other side as well. Just season with your heart here. Now I have 3 separate containers. In the first one I'm adding about a 1/2 cup of flour. In the second one I'm adding in 2 eggs. You will want to beat those together really well. And in the last container I'm adding a 1/2 cup of panko breadcrumbs and a 1/2 cup of grated Parmesan cheese. I'm just using my measuring cup to break up the larger pieces of Parmesan and get that mixed together. And last but not least, I'm adding 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning in here as well. To get started with the chicken, I'm just going to first lay it in the flour. Make sure you pat it on both sides really good, and then you will transfer it over to the egg. Again, make sure you cover it on both sides. And then last, you'll take it over to the panko and Parmesan cheese mixture. Make sure you really pack that on there, and then you'll just repeat that with all your chicken. Over on my stove, I have my cast iron pan here that I heated up some oil in. This one is about 13 inches big, I think, maybe 12 inches. It's a pretty decent sized pan. I'm gonna go ahead and get all this chicken in here. You really shouldn't crowd your chicken too much if you can, but I wasn't going to pull out a second pan for this. So I went ahead and put all 4 of them in there, and now I'm just gonna let those cook on both sides for about 2-ish minutes. until I start getting this really beautiful golden color. And I did have to add a little bit more oil in there just because my chicken soaked up a lot of that olive oil. And after about a minute or so, I'm going to transfer this entire pan into the oven. This chicken will not take that long in here, maybe 5 to 10 minutes depending on how thick your chicken is, since it is already kind of cooked on the outside a bit. So just make sure your chicken has hit at least 165 degrees. And then this is what my finished plate looked like. This chicken is so yummy. One of our favorites. I did serve it with a packet of creamy Knorr pasta just because it was quick and easy, and then some French style green beans. Up next, this is a great recipe if you are low carb or even keto. We're going to be making this pizza chicken. I started by preheating my oven to 375, and now I have 2 chicken breasts that I'm just going to cut in half. This will make 4 smaller pieces of chicken. You can really do any toppings you want for this pizza chicken. For me, I was going to do some mushrooms, green bell pepper, and then also some red onion. If you choose to do onion though, you really don't need that much because it will overpower your dish if you have a ton. Over to a 9x13 baking dish, I'm just spraying that down with a little bit of olive oil spray. Now I'm going to go ahead and transfer my chicken in here. I'm going to lightly season my chicken with some garlic powder, salt, and pepper. You don't have to go too crazy, you just don't want to have plain chicken in here. On top of my chicken, I'm just using some pizza sauce, and then just make sure you don't double dip your spoon back into the jar after you've touched the chicken, so you might want to put this in a separate bowl or whatever you need to do. Spread that out as evenly as you can, and then next we're going to be adding some cheese. I'm just using some shredded mozzarella cheese. You can add as much cheese as you want. I think I added a cup, maybe a little bit more than a cup. Now go ahead and start adding your toppings. I'm adding on my sliced mushrooms, my sliced red onions, sliced green bell pepper. I also had some jalapenos in the fridge, and my husband said that he'd love to have them, and I was like, you know what, me too. So we went ahead and just added on some jalapenos. And then last but not least, we are going to add some pepperoni. I am using turkey pepperoni, but you can use regular. My chicken only took about 15 minutes in the oven because it was so thin, but if you have thicker chicken, it might take more, closer to 20-25 minutes. So just make sure you keep an eye on that. Here's what my chicken looked like coming out of the oven. I did turn broil on for about a minute or two just to crisp up my pepperonis a bit. And then this is what my finished plate looked like. I just served this with a really simple side salad. Next up, we're making this creamy chicken and potatoes, definitely one of our favorites. I'm going to go ahead and get my chicken prepared. We're going to marinate this chicken overnight, so this is the day before. I have 2 chicken breasts that I'm cutting in half, and then I'm cutting each of those in another 2 to 3 pieces. This recipe actually goes really far with only 2 pieces of chicken, so you can feed a lot of people. Into a large container with a lid, I'm adding 2 eggs, 1 cup of milk. I believe I actually used half and half just because that's what I had on hand. A half teaspoon of salt and a few shakes of pepper. I'm just going to whisk this together and then add all of my chicken in here. I'm just using a fork to mix this together a little bit. I want to make sure the chicken gets covered on all sides and that it's underneath the liquid as much as possible. Now I'm just going to add a lid, and this is going in the fridge until tomorrow. The next day I got my oven preheating to 350 degrees, and over to my container I am adding 1 cup of flour, 2 tablespoons of paprika, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. I'm just going to go ahead and get this combined. If you are looking at the original recipe that I added down in the description box, I do add a lot less salt than they do because when I made this recipe for the very first time, it was really salty. So now I just make it with a little less salt than the recipe calls for. Now I've gotten the chicken out of the refrigerator, it's ready to go, and we are going to go ahead and just start adding it into our flour and seasoning mixture. And then once it's covered, I'm just going to add it over to my cutting board until I'm ready to cook them. Now over to my cast iron, I've heated up some olive oil and a little bit of butter. I like to combine the two. I'm going to go ahead and add all of my chicken in here and let those start to cook. I just cook these for about 2 to 3 minutes until both sides have crisped up. While the first batch of my chicken was cooking, I went ahead and sliced up 6 ounces of mushrooms. And once the first batch was done, I just removed those over to a plate. And then for my second batch, I'm going to add those to half of the skillet. And on the other half, we're going to go ahead and add those mushrooms. Again, we're going to let this chicken crisp up a little bit, and then my mushrooms are just going to slightly saute in here. Next, over to a large bowl, I'm adding 1 can of cream of mushroom and 1 can of cream of chicken. You can use 2 of each or 1 of each just like I did. A 1/4 cup of sour cream, 1 cup of water, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder, and a 1/4 teaspoon of paprika. I'm going to go ahead and get that mixed together. Now that our cream sauce is ready, our chicken should be ready to go as well. So I'm going to spread the mushrooms out and then add the rest of the chicken back into my cast iron. The original recipe, she just adds them over to a casserole dish, so this is part that I do differently. I just like to cook it right here in my cast iron, and now I'm adding the cream sauce right over the top of all that chicken. I just spread that out with the back of my spoon to make sure it was covering all the chicken, and then I placed this in the oven for 30 minutes. While my chicken was in the oven, I did go ahead and cook up 3 slices of thick bacon and get some water started for my potatoes. Here is the chicken and cream mixture coming out of the oven after the 30 minutes. Now we're going to go ahead and add cheese on top of this. I'm adding about 1 cup of shredded mozzarella cheese. Next, I'm adding the bacon that I cooked up. I did crumble this up pretty fine, and I'm just going to sprinkle this as evenly as I can over the top. Now I'm adding this back into the oven long enough to melt the cheese for about 10 minutes. Here's what it looks like coming out of the oven, all the cheese nicely melted, and then this is what my finished plate looked like. Like I said, I made some mashed potatoes to go with this and some asparagus. I just steamed that. And then this is so delicious with the cream sauce on the mashed potatoes. And like I said, it gets a little salty, so I do cut the salt in the recipe just a little bit. But I'll link the recipe below, and then I will also tell you what I did different below. I hope you enjoyed today's video. There is a lot of great recipes in today's video, so I do hope you give them a shot. And I will see you guys back here this Wednesday.